Welcome back to another Waynos Fotos video, and today's topic is about mechanical group sets versus electric group sets. And with the manufacturers now making their bikes more proprietary, they're forcing the customers to opt for disc brakes and also electric group sets. But really, are we getting any more value with buying these electric group sets? Well, let's have a bit of a discussion about the pros and cons of that after we roll that intro. Well, let's first have a look at how the industry is changing and how electric group sets are changing the way manufacturers are making their frames. Now, because we have wireless and we actually have cabled group sets, they can actually now make frames a lot different to the old frames where we had to allow for cables. And the actual stem and headsets are designed to have completely concealed wiring. And this really increased the aesthetics of the bicycle. So this is one of the very first advantages that we have with electric group sets. The bike is made and it's a lot cleaner because you don't really need to have those cables and have a minimum radius to actually allow for. Electric group sets offer real advantage for the people that may have some problems with their hands, like they've either got small hands, or they may have arthritis, or they may actually have a disability. And the actual controls on the actual STIs or the ergo powers or whatever manufacturer it is can actually be changed to suit the way that this person wants to actually use the controls. So this is a real advantage. And I actually saw one disabled person who was going to the Olympics, and they had actually programmed the actual controls so they could all be used from one hand. So this is a major advantage. It allows people who normally wouldn't be able to cycle to actually get into cycle and actually enjoy cycling and these group sets the way that other people do. One thing that is pretty common agreed on is that the front shifting or the front derailleur, it has a much more consistent power and it pushes the chain across from the small ring to the big ring and from the big ring to the small ring a lot easier. So your front change is actually becoming more consistent. Now let's look at the pros of a mechanical group set. Now the first thing is that the expense, they're cheaper. They're a lot cheaper, and obviously that hits the hip pocket because these electric group sets can be considerably more expensive than the mechanical counterparts. So that's the number one first thing off the shelf, that you can get yourself a bike with a top group set for quite significantly less money. And mechanical group sets are typically lighter than the electric counterparts. We may be talking about small amounts, but they generally work out lighter. And the other thing that you get with a mechanical group set is that if you actually have any problems with it, usually the local bike shop can sort it out, unless it's actually a physical broken part. But with the electric group sets, there's nothing they can do because they're a sealed unit, so they need to be sent off. And one of the other benefits of having a mechanical group set is if you drop your bike, which unfortunately sometimes happens at these cafes, I've seen it. One lady had a pram and she knocked someone's bike and it fell over, and you damage your derailleur, then you can be talking double the price of exactly the same model in the rear derailleur. So this can actually work out quite expensive for your ongoing repairs. And then there's the whole thing with electric. They do need to be charged. So generally you need to have your bike, at some point you have to have a regime to charge them. And with the SRAM units, I think that's best because you can actually have your bike in the garage, take your battery out and charge them. But with some of the other brands, you actually have to have some supply of electricity near the bike, which can be a bit of a pain for some people, depending where they want to store their bike. And of course, you know, people are out riding and they do actually forget to charge their batteries and they actually go flat. And I would say that most people that I know that have had Di2, I would say probably 8 out of 10 have actually let their batteries run flat. So even though we might say they last a long time and it's easy to charge them, people do forget. So that's one thing you don't have to worry about with mechanical. You don't have to charge the system. Okay, let's have a look at the cons of the electric group sets. Now, the first thing is they're expensive. They're depending on the brand, they can actually be quite a lot expensive. They could be 50% more expensive. So this is actually a really big con. And you really got to ask yourself, you know, to just have that little button to press, is it really worth the extra cost? So that's the first thing that you need to consider if you're buying one of these bikes. You could actually probably have better wheels on your bike and have a mechanical group set, and you could have an overall better bike just because now you're just using a cable to change gears. One point that's become apparent with electric group sets, and also with a lot of electrical components, is that they become obsolete a lot quicker. So if you've got an electric group set, you might actually find, if you want to keep it for a long time, that when you come to actually break something, or something breaks, or you want to replace something, you actually can't get a compatible part. And this is actually the case with the first generation Di2. If you actually have something go wrong with it, there's actually no replacement. Shimano do not support it. So that's one of the problems of electric group sets. They get superseded a lot quicker. Whilst with mechanical, generally as long as the pull ratio is the same, you can actually get them to work. And there's quite a few hacks around to get mechanical systems to work with different systems and different cassettes and so forth. Yeah, and if you actually have any problems and you find it doesn't shift, or it's stuck in a gear or whatever, and you take it down your local bike shop, there's not a lot they can do apart from just basically connecting it up to a computer and just having a look for faults or fault indicators. They can't really do anything to fix it. They have to send it off to the manufacturer or get a replacement to bring in, which could actually take some time. So that's one disadvantage. It's good when it's working, but when it's not working, it can be a real pain. Okay, well, we've talked about the electrics pros and cons and the pros of mechanical. Now we need to get on to the actual cons of the mechanical. Now they do actually have a few, especially with the way the proprietary items are coming onto the bicycles, especially with these new headsets and the way they're designing the frames. They're designing them with more turns and concealing everything in the bike. So what actually happens here is your mechanical systems either cannot be used on these frames, or if they are, with like some of the frames that I've had, they actually don't work very well because there's so much friction in all the bends in the cables that they actually don't shift properly, especially with these newer systems, because the actual actuation is much finer because we're getting more and more gears. So this is actually a problem. So you need to actually have a bike where the actual cable that goes through the frame is actually very straight and there's as minimal turns as possible to get the best shifting. So this is probably, I would say, one of the biggest downsides of the mechanical group sets. You do need a frame that's designed well, and you also can't have some of these modern frames that are designed specific for electric bikes. Now it's pretty common knowledge that the front derailleur shift on a lot of mechanical systems is not as good as the electric systems, because the actual pressure that's being applied by a motor is very consistent, whilst when you're just pushing your hand across, you actually have to feel it and feel it onto the big chainring. So that's one negative. The front derailleur is not as good. But I will have to say that with my latest group set from Campagnolo, the 12-speed, the front derailleur is much improved, and it's almost impossible not to miss the shift. It's just, it works great. So they are getting better, and they are getting them closer to the electric counterparts. And of course, with a mechanical system, because it is mechanical and it takes your pressure to pull a cable against the spring that's set in the derailleur, it takes a lot more force. And one of the biggest negatives is if you're changing multiple shifts, you actually have to push the lever a long way because it's click, 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 and that all is a physical distance that you're pulling the cable. Whilst on an electric system, you just hold the button and it just shifts across. So this is really a feel thing. It doesn't actually feel as nice as it does with the electric system. Okay, so in conclusion, what does all this mean? I mean, obviously people, they go, oh yeah, I just like my electric system, or I just like my mechanical. Now, I must admit, I lean towards the mechanical systems, and the reason why this is because apart from having a little motor in your derailleurs and a little micro switch that's in your STIs, the actual system is completely the same. The parallelograms are the same, the actual chain, the cogs are all the same. The way it derails and puts it onto the different cog is the same. And what people don't realise, they say they're more accurate, but the actual derailleurs on the electric systems don't have some magical alignment. They just set like a mechanical system is. I mean, okay, you may get a bit of grit or dirt in the cables that might actually upset that, but if they're maintained and set up properly, I can't see how there's any difference in the shifting. One uses a spring and one just uses a motor, and they just shift a predetermined distance, and that's it. There's no derailleur knowing exactly where the cog is and it lines it up. There's no infrared light that picks up the cog to line it up. It's just a set increment the motor moves, and that's it. So you know, as far as the physical changing of the systems goes, They're identical. And you do have the advantage of it being cheaper, right? For the mechanical, it's you know, you can get yourself a top-end group set, or you could even buy the best group set, and it still will probably be cheaper than the actual electric of the lower group sets. So you can actually get yourself a higher quality, lighter group set for probably the same money. And to me, this is more significant. You know, I'd rather have the better quality group set than one that's actually got electric. So to me, that's why I like the mechanical systems. And it also allows you to buy other components on the bike with that money you've saved. So this is where I think the mechanical group sets have an advantage. You can get a potentially better bike overall than you can if you had an electric system on the bike. Yeah, one area where the electric system really shines is you can program the buttons to do whatever you want. And you might go, well, so what? But if you're actually getting a bit older and you've actually got some arthritis in your hands, or there's certain, you know, part of your fingers that have actually got a problem, excuse me, you can actually program the buttons any way you like. So, you know, you can actually get around these problems that you may have with your fingers or your arthritis, and you can actually enjoy these bikes a lot more than you would if you had a mechanical set. So this is a real bonus for the electric systems. Well, really, in my point of view, I really can't say that the extra cost is worth the value, or should they say, is that the juice is not worth the squeeze. I actually had tried quite a few of the electric group sets on my last bike. I was going to get the electric on there, and I must admit I was somewhat underwhelmed. I just didn't feel there was an advantage. In fact, I actually felt the changes were slow compared to the mechanical, and I just couldn't warrant the extra money, and especially the SRAM ETAP, which was the red at the time, not the new one, not the new AXS. I really was underwhelmed. I was so looking forward to getting this system because I liked the shift system, and when I actually rode it, I actually didn't like the rubbers on the head. I thought they felt a bit cheap, and also the change was very, very slow. So I went back to my mechanical group set, and you know, I've been riding that. But now I've got my new 12-speed. The front derailleurs have been significantly improved, and I really don't think there's as much difference between them now, and the mechanicals have closed the gap. So it's fine if you've got the money and you want to spend it, and you know, a top-end bike now with a Dura-ace electric and everything on it is pushing about 20 grand AUD. You know, I would rather save a bit of money and put some better wheels on, or have a cheaper group set, mechanical group set, and you can save a significant amount of money. I don't think it's worth the extra dosh you have to, you know, take out of your pocket. Anyway, let me know what you think about. Are you swear by electrics, the Di2s, or, you know, are you a mechanical guy and think that all of these extra things, you know, are just more complex items to be put on a bike? So that's where I'm going to leave it, guys, and I'll catch you next vid. Cheers.